Hello and welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and today we are joined by Fidel, who is a paramedic from New York. He has 15 years experience as a medic and 3 years as an EMT prior to that. So thank you for joining us, Fidel.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No, wonderful. Fidel's jumped on today. So like I said, I experienced as a paramedic in New York as well as an EMT, and he was also an Army veteran. So yeah, Fidel, thank you for joining us, and really just sort of want to kind of dive on in and can you tell us what made you become interested to become either an EMT or a paramedic?
All right, you get the long version.
I do get the long version.
So my first experience with EMS, I was I was like maybe 10, and I got hit by a car.
Oh,
And
wow.
I
Sorry to
was,
hear that.
it was minor injuries, but I blacked out and I woke up in the ambulance. And I was playing on the street. This when kids still played in the street,
Yeah,
and
I
my parents weren't at home, and I don't. So it was just me, and I'm not too sure if it was an EMT
know.
or a paramedic in the ambulance with me. So I just remember that. And then I remember going to the hospital. I remember coming home. But since then, I always had a thought in my mind, about working on the ambulance. And as a teenager, I used to see the ambulance drive by and be like, hey, it'll be cool to work on the ambulance. I remember I was on the ambulance when I
Yeah.
was young. I had no idea the difference between EMTs and paramedics. General public, they don't really know the difference between the level of care you get from
No,
either.
probably not. Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I finished high school, there was a college by me that it was three phases. The first semester was basic CPR. The
Okay.
second semester was first aid. I don't know if it was AHA or Red Cross first aid. And then the third semester was the actual EMT program. So I did the
Okay.
first two semester, and the third semester, my brother got me a job, and I left school and I started working, and I worked in telecommunications for about 10 to 15 years.
Oh,
And
wow, okay.
then, there were a lot of changes in the industry, and then I didn't have a job anymore. And
Mhm.
at that time I was married. I had a mortgage. My daughter was 4, my wife was pregnant, my wife at the time
Mhm.
was pregnant with my son. And I thought, what did I want to do? What do I want to do with my life, my career? And I was like, hey, I always wanted to work in an ambulance. My ex she was always very supportive of whatever
Yeah.
career path I chose.
Nice.
So I enlisted in a EMT program. I had a little money saved away, and I'm
Yeah.
three-quarter way finished with the program. And we're having a talk with the professor. So I don't know if you know the way it works in New York City is the
Mm.
city of New York contracts the fire department to handle their EMS. So
Oh, okay.
they don't really have the resources to cover all the areas, so they subcontract with the hospital uh, agencies to do 911. So it's the same job, same radio frequencies,
Yeah.
same protocols, same level of training. It's just that my uniform and check is from the hospital. But the instructor
Okay.
was telling me, hey, most of you guys fresh out of school, you're not going to get a job with a hospital without any experience. Some of you guys might go into the fire department if they're hiring at the time, but most of you guys are going to work
Yeah.
private transport. And he's telling me the salary for private transport, which is little to nothing. It was less than
Yeah.
$10 an hour at the time. And
Oh,
I'm thinking, oh
wow.
my God, my wife is going to kill me. Because I think, the medical field, you're going to make money, but it
Yeah.
wasn't at the time. But I was already committed. I was working 60, 70 hours a week doing private transport. I was about to leave. Um, I worked for about a year. I was about to leave EMS altogether. And I remember I had a retired fire department EMT, and he was always telling, as a partner, he was always telling me, don't even try applying at a hospital. They're not going to hire you without 3 years experience. So I listened for a little bit. I remember one day, it was a year in,
Yeah.
a suit on for whatever reason. And I said, you know what, let me just stop by the hospital base with a resume. and I stopped
Mm-hmm.
in. And I'm gonna give a shout out. I don't know if she'll ever see it, but my first manager, her name is Maddie Fong. She gave me my break in,
Oh, that's
in,
nice.
in hospital-based 911,
Yeah.
and I've been working EMS since. I worked for a few hospital agencies. I worked for the fire department for a little bit. It was a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of different culture. I came back to the hospital. I left EMS to do organ transplant for a little bit. It's a great job, great mission.
Yeah.
But I'm more comfortable on the EMS working in the streets. So I came back and here I
Okay.
am still. That's the long
Wow.
version.
I appreciate you giving me the long version. So when you're saying, so you said that you had like a somewhat of a career in telecommunications, or at what age did you then kind of come back to do your EMS schooling?
I was in my early 30s.
Okay. And do you think sort of going down that path when you were like a little bit older and a bit more like mature, do you think it sort of helped you either like in, attending the jobs and having that level of maturity? Like, do you think that that was of benefit for you?
You know, I can't say for sure if it would have made a difference, but I think my personality type was molded as a teenager. So I don't think it would have changed the way my perspective of the job. But I wish
Hmm.
I would have started sooner, because this is what
Okay.
I'm happy doing. I've worked many different professions, and
Yeah.
this is what there's never been a day working EMS where I'm like, I don't want to go to work. Maybe if I'm tired or I have a party to go to, I might not want to go that day. But the job itself, I've
Yeah.
always enjoyed the job.
Yeah. Yep, that's cool. Nice. All right. And so yeah, so you've been doing that for, well, sort of like all up like 18 years now.
Right?
Um
Total about,
and
yeah.
okay. And you said you went into, so when you were talking about like organ transplant, were you then kind of on a crew that would like transport the organs between
No,
hospitals and stuff?
I was a transplant coordinator where
Oh
uh
wow.
it's a complicated position where you do donor management, where once the patient becomes an authorized organ donor in the ICU, we sit with that patient and then we work with the ICU team and the intensivist, and we manage them not for life. It's a different treatment model. You manage them for organ preservation. So
Yep, yep, yep.
you have your own different set of protocols and
Hmm.
medications that you give to the patient. So we manage them on the vents and the pressors and the hormones.
Okay.
Because once you become brain dead, your body stops producing certain hormones. But that
Yep.
was only 10% of the job. The other
Yep.
80-90% was like basically glorified administrative work, which was not. It's a great job. People love it and
Yeah.
excel at it, and it's still a great mission. I don't want to, trash talk
Yeah.
profession, but it
Oh
just
no.
was. I mean, it was a different culture. I worked, the last um almost 20 years in the streets. Now I'm stuck
Hmm.
in an office, quote unquote. They
Yeah.
have you for, and it's 24-hour shifts. So, and it's
Oh
cold in
wow.
there. I hate being cold.
Yeah, but I think, you strike me as like a very calm, like level-headed person. So to have presence on the street, I think would, be a benefit in any kind of like emergency situation. And I think you'd be sort of pretty maybe similar to my husband, where like my husband is not a person who can sit in an office behind a desk. Like it's not his thing. He's just too busy and too all over the place. So like maybe you guys like vibrate on like the same frequency and you're like, I gotta be out, I gotta be doing stuff. Like you have to be
Oh,
built a certain way to be able to it's all right. To be able to either sit behind a desk and do that kind of thing or be out on the road.
yeah, it makes sense. It's a different personality type to do this
Yeah,
job and enjoy it. So, because some people still do the job. I stopped them from crossing this.
that's
Some
all right.
people
Fidel's
still,
cat's trying to make a guest appearance on our podcast at the moment, so that's what I giggled at before he walked
they only
past.
mess with
Walked
me
past the
when I'm
cat.
actually doing something.
That's all
So,
right.
my apologies.
No,
Um,
no, go ahead.
it takes a different personality type to still do this job and enjoy it. Some people still do it, but they don't enjoy it. I have colleagues that, you know, don't enjoy the work. And I ask myself, why are you still doing it? But
Yeah.
I don't know what goes on in other people's personal lives, why they choose to do what they do. I know if
Yeah.
if I'm unhappy doing something, I make a change. And so
Yeah.
the only reason I left EMS to go do organ transplant is I figured it's the next step in my career. It's, progress,
Okay.
evolution. So I have no
Hmm.
regrets. I tried it, but
Yeah.
I'm glad I did, to know that I don't like it. It made me appreciate EMS even more.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, sometimes it is to be able to like step back and get that perspective and be like, I've actually got it pretty. And so, um, so then when you go to work, how long are your shifts for where you're at as a paramedic? Are they 12 hours? Are they 24?
So depending on the agency you work for, it's anywhere from they have 8-hour tours and 12-hour tours. If you do an 8-hour tour, you're allowed to do doubles. So you can do a
Okay.
16-hour shift straight. If you do 12
Okay.
hours, you can't do any more than 12 unless you get mandated, and they could only keep you for 4 more hours for a total of 16.
Okay. So 16 hours is like the maximum
Yes.
amount that you
Yes.
guys are allowed to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's
And
not,
then do you
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was gonna say, and then are there like mandatory breaks, like in terms of
No, we
you
don't
then
get.
you can't come back to work for another X amount of hours, or does that again depend on whether you've been mandated to come back or not?
Um, and so the fire department, they keep track of your tours in there. It's a
Hmm.
system, so you cannot do 3 tours straight in a row if you're working an
Okay.
8 hour
Yep.
tour. And if you can't, and if you're working 12 hours, you can't do 2 12s. Now, some people, there's a way around it. They hop from one agency to another agency,
Ah,
and
okay.
it's hard to keep track, and
Yeah.
it's you're not supposed to do it, but some
Mm.
people work 24 hours straight. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
So what about
at
the
midnight, the clock resets itself, as far as like
yeah.
we could do it. So the morning tour is a tour 2, and the evening tour is
Okay.
a tour 3, and the overnight is a tour 1. So if you do a tour 2, tour 3, the system resets before the tour 1, so you could jump straight into tour 1 at another agency. The same
Oh,
agency
okay.
won't let you do it because that's their internal policy.
Yeah. Yeah. So is it the same for the firefighters there, or is that strictly
No,
just for the paramedics?
no, firefighters have the good life. They sleep in a firehouse. We respond in a street corner somewhere out of an ambulance. Firefighters sleep, they cook, they rescue
They shoot
kittens
the
out of
shit
trees.
around the firehouse table.
No, they have a great job. It's a little different what they do. We call them CFRs. They're trained to the CFR level, and they do
Yep.
respond to our
Yep.
call at a CFR level to provide basic care.
Yep.
Most of the firehouses are closer than to the assignment than we are usually, because it's limited ambulances. So they usually get there
Yep.
before us, and their job
Yep.
is to render basic care before we get there.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
But they
sense.
do 24-hour shifts.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's the same up here in Massachusetts. Yeah, most places do 24 hours, and I was just wondering, and I guess like especially because if you're in your position as a paramedic and you're rocking up to a scene and you're like trying to give someone critical first aid and administer medication, or that kind of thing, like if like fatigue comes into play, it's really got to perhaps endanger patient care if you're
Yeah.
at a certain level, when like obviously there's studies that show if you're tired to a certain extent, it's worse than being intoxicated.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
I guess that's the reason why they won't allow you to work more than 2 shifts in a row, because your judgment
Yeah.
gets skewed. It's like you said, it's almost worse than being intoxicated. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, that makes sense. And so the place where you're at now, how long have you been there for?
Actually, it's only been a year because I came back to them after I left organ transplant. So my organ transplant stint was pretty recent, about
Oh,
eight.
okay. Yep.
So I've been working for this agency for a year, organ transplant for a year before that, and the last agency I worked for was for about 10 years.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. And so you just went where like there was an available position. It wasn't like one's better than another.
Yeah.
It was just
So the job I left for organ transplant, my position was filled, and there was
okay. Yep.
no openings available. So I had to go to another agency that fit my financial needs and
Hmm.
it's wise. It's a good gig. I'm happy where I'm at right now.
Nice. That's good. Happy to hear it. And so, as someone who doesn't know much about sort of, the paramedic life and schedule and stuff like that, is it like a firefighter or like a police officer in America where you work with the same crew or the same kind of person as like a quote unquote partner, or is it you kind of just work your shifts and whoever's working that shift is the person for that day?
It's a little bit of both. It's regularly irregular to use a cardiology term. So I'll have the same partner every Monday,
Okay.
and then I'm just using a random
Yeah.
example. Every
Yeah.
Monday and Tuesday, I have a different partner every Monday. I mean, every Tuesday and Wednesday. And the only time I'll get a different partner is if someone goes on vacation, because they also have part timers that fill in, like vacation relief guys that fill in the spots here and there. They
Yeah.
also have what they call per diem medics, where they only pick up shifts when
Yeah.
needed. So they're there to fill in the slot. So I usually have a regular two or three set of partners that I work with.
Okay. And then, yeah, then just a couple of fill in here and there for various reasons.
Yeah,
Okay. Cool. That makes sense. And so, why New York? Did you grow up in that state or
I
did you
grew up.
find yourself
This is
there?
where I got hit by that car when I was a kid in New York City.
Really?
Yeah, this is where I grew up.
Okay.
Uh, People trash talk New York, but I don't see myself leaving. I love the city. It
Yeah.
has its pros and cons. For
Yeah.
me, a lot more pros than cons.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean I've been I think I've been maybe 4 or 5 times now, and I love it. Like, every time I have visited New York, I have done something different. I think there's always something different to do, something different to see, something different to experience, and I think that's what I love about that city, and as someone who grew up in a different country, like, everyone in the world knows New York. Like it's so iconic, and TV shows and the movies and everything that you see, and then to kind of go and stand there, like there's something, there's only certain places I think in the world that really have just that sense of, I think, awe when you get to go. And I think New York is one of those cities in my opinion, at least. But yeah, I think it's
I,
awesome.
I concur. Anything at any time. That's the New York motto. I haven't, I haven't really traveled much internationally, but I've been to a lot of big cities in the U.S.
Yeah.
L.A., Dallas. They're all great, but there's no place like it's New York is a little different, and I'm not just saying that because I live here. I've actually traveled to other states to
Yeah,
see
you're
their.
not you're not biased at all, Fidel. Not at all.
I'm trying not to be. I know
That's okay.
some of my
I
colleagues hate New York. They're dying to get out. Not me.
Really? I mean, so given that, I mean, are you guys just busy all the time? Like, is it because obviously it's, such a highly populated, highly dense, city. And with all obviously not monuments, but like big tourist attractions and all that kind of thing. Like, does it ebb and flow, or is it just you guys are just go, go, go like all the time?
So when I started EMS, so we do about 3,000 911 calls. Well, not that's how it used to be when I started. About 3,000 911 calls a day, right? But
Jesus.
it was slowly progressively getting higher over the years. During
Really?
COVID, we spiked to about 7,000 calls a day, which was
Wow.
more than double. We had to call in mutual aid from other states,
Yep.
and all the other state EMS. FEMA was great.
Yep.
OEM, Emergency Management Department.
Yep.
Everyone worked really well to help
Yep.
us with the call volume. So once
Yep.
COVID died down, no pun
Mhm.
intended. I'm sorry.
So good.
The numbers lower, but now we have the same manpower, if not even less, because EMS has a high attrition rate. We're
Okay.
doing over 5,000 calls a day with the same manpower we were doing 3,000 calls a day about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So there were slow areas. You know, there's busy areas like Midtown Manhattan and the Bronx,
Yeah.
and you had slower areas in the outer boroughs, but not everywhere is busy. We're doing like last night when I left the CAD number. That's how we each call as a CAD number was at
Yeah.
about 6,200. So it's
Jesus.
yeah, it's a lot. It's busy, so there is no sitting around.
And I mean, I guess like, so after, I mean, I think anyone listening would know how hard New York was hit at the very beginning of the pandemic, and especially, you know, like I'm up in Boston, and being on the East Coast, and you know, everyone kind of came over from Europe, and we sort of, you know, we got smashed. But obviously the extent that New York did, like, tell me what that was like back back then, back in that sort of early part of 2020.
So on prior to COVID, as a medic, I would probably work about 3 to 4 cardiac arrests a month.
Mhm.
During COVID, and it just abruptly started. One week, people just started passing. So I was working literally 5 cardiac arrests a night. And every unit was working about 5 cardiac arrests a night for about 3 weeks straight. And
Wow.
as abruptly as the cardiac arrest call types came in,
Mhm.
it just stopped. You know, it started all of a sudden and stopped for whatever reason. I don't know. So
Yeah.
maybe those that were susceptible,
Yeah. Like really early
they-
on sort of thing.
yeah, exposure is inevitable. You can't hide from exposure. You're gonna get exposed. Some people, they handle it better than others.
Yeah.
I had people. Well, I don't know if your viewers know much about oxygen saturation. So the normal oxygen saturation, 94%, what the
Yeah.
AHA recommends. 90 is a little low. In the
Mhm.
80s, you're in respiratory, uh, you're hypoxic, and then anything less than that,
Okay.
you need to be artificially, mechanically ventilated. I had patients that were talking to me just with a sat of 60, 50, 40.
Wow.
I'm not even joking. And it was
Yeah.
whatever COVID did to the human body, it wreaked havoc
Yeah.
on its cells. So I
Mm.
don't know how well those patients fare because you can only take them to the hospital and what the
Yeah.
hospital was after.
Yeah.
We had different protocols that day. Like it was the call volume was so high. If patients didn't want to go to the hospital, no matter how severe,
It
you
was like,
just you just okay. Bye. I had
yeah.
actually had one guy. He looked like he was circling the drain, as we say, with a
Mhm.
SAT 60, and
Jesus.
we it was COVID protocols. We could RMA leave him there if he wanted to leave, but I told him I was like, bro, you need to go to the hospital. You might not make it
Yeah.
to the morning. And he had his kids around him, and he told me, if I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die at home with my family. And what can I say to that? So I said, all right, if you
Yeah.
change your mind, just call 911.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that would have been, and I can imagine how sort of full on that was for you and your colleagues in all of the first responder realms. You know, that was really tough on your city. How has everyone fared since then? Because even like you were just saying, you know, even like the call volumes are still so incredibly high, and your staff percentages haven't, you know, increased massively. Like, are you finding that a lot of your colleagues are just super burnt out or leaving in droves? Like, where is it at in regards to that?
Yeah, a lot of EMS personnel left because of COVID,
Okay.
and right after COVID, they didn't want to stay for whatever
Yeah.
reasons. A lot of people use EMS as a stepping stone, like either to go, work it while going to nursing school or medical school or PA
Yeah.
school. There's very, very, it's a handful that actually stay in it
Okay.
for the long term.
Yeah.
and it's not. We're actually. There's a lot of unions now that's fighting to increase our salary and our benefits to keep people in
Yeah.
EMS.
Yeah.
We don't get it. We don't get any help from the city, even though I work for the hospitals. But whatever happens to the city agencies, it affects us also.
Yeah, of course.
Just
Yeah.
to them. So a lot of people feel that EMS is the stepchildren of the 911 system, at least here in New York. In New York,
Yeah,
I
children.
know a lot of other states EMS is well respected and well taken care of. I'll give you an example. In most states, it's considered a promotion to go from firefighter to paramedic. In New York City, it's the opposite. It's if you work for the fire department, it's
Yeah.
considered a promotion from medic to firefighter. They under the same umbrella of the fire department, but they respond separately. They're not in the same firehouse. They're completely different branches of the fire.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
yeah, so a lot of people don't. A lot of fire department medics don't stay if they have the opportunity to go work as a firefighter because the pay is
Yeah.
better, the
Yeah.
contract is better, the pension is better.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so that's interesting. So I mean, they obviously wouldn't lose their skills as a paramedic. So then are they considered a firefighter paramedic, or they're just like, no, I'm purely
No,
just a firefighter now?
it's so although they still retain their certification as a medic, they become a CFR once they work. They could only operate as a firefighter while they're working as a firefighter. They can't do any, not even EMT skills. They just can do CFR skills.
Wow.
Some firefighters still they moonlight as medics for private
Yeah.
agencies,
Yeah.
but no, there's fire suppression, we call it, and EMS are two separate agencies with two
Yeah.
different scope of practice altogether. Even
Interesting.
though they were
Yeah.
trained
No.
as
Yeah. No, because I think with like the department that like my husband works for, like they're sort of like both, and then it will often dictate, whether they work on like a ladder or on say like an engine who respond to most of the medical calls as well. So that's interesting
yeah,
that each
yeah,
sort of place does a little bit differently.
yeah. They do it like that
Um,
in New York, kind of, where it's fire EMS in one, but in New York City it's
oh,
completely separate,
yeah, yeah.
separate
And I
contracts.
guess, yeah, you guys, I mean, and they would, I guess, maybe doing something different because you cover like such an enormous patch that, yeah, maybe it's like works better that it does have to be specialized in like this way and this way and this way. Who
Yeah,
knows?
I would assume so because of the call volume. It's too high to. They don't have the manpower to combine fire and EMS.
Yeah, yeah. And and so because that sounds like there is a lot of like interagency like interactions, between you guys, so like the hospital EMS and the fire department EMS and fireys and all that kind of thing. What's like the camaraderie like even just, within your department and then with like your interagencies?
There's friendly banter, but
Yeah.
for the most part, we all work well together. When you call 911 in New York City, technically you're supposed to get an ambulance, whether it's an ALS or BLS ambulance, depending on the level of care you need. You're supposed to get
Yeah.
a RMP, which is a squad car, and
Okay.
an engine, which they respond to medical cars. The policemen are there for our safety. The
Hmm.
firefighters are there for um, whatever we need, basic care. But it doesn't
Yeah.
always happen like that because there's so high of a call volume. We'll get on jobs and it's just us. We'll get on jobs as the police officers
Yeah.
and the firefighters. Sometimes it's just the firefighters. But if we have, like, say, a cardiac arrest, protocol is to have firefighters with us to help us
Okay.
with whatever we need. And if we have
Yeah.
EDPs, I don't know if you guys have it's like psych patients, emotionally
Oh,
disturbed
okay. Yeah.
patients. We're required to have police officers with us, and we're there
Yeah.
just for medical care. So we all
Yeah.
work
So because
hand in hand. We all
yeah.
know each other. I have a lot of friends, good friends that are cops and firefighters that I've met on the job over the years.
Hmm. No, that makes sense. And I guess because the police officers would have the like arrest power to
Yeah,
convey someone to get like a psychiatric assessment and all that kind of
yeah.
thing. I know I used to have
That's
to, they obviously call it something different back where I come from, but we used to have to do a lot of that kind of stuff too, or if someone was threatening suicide and all that kind of
yes,
thing.
exactly. So sometimes the police will get on scene for like a domestic call, and they'll think
Mm-hmm.
someone needs evaluation, so they'll call for us to go and
Yep.
transport the patient.
Yep.
Sometimes they're they need sedation, the patient
Yep.
sometimes. So we work
Yep.
hand in hand.
Oh, nice. Well, good to hear that there's a good level of, relationships built there. Um, what was I going to say? So you kind of also said that, sometimes the police come in a manner of speaking as like some sort of level of protection. Like I think anyone who has visited New York, even just traveled on the subway, like there is often some crazy shit that goes on in that city.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, like what kind of, what are like your most common jobs, or what like weird shit do you guys like get called
the
to?
most
Man, you
common.
couldn't even write this, you couldn't make it up.
So, so about maybe 10 to 15% of our call volume actually warrants an ambulance. The actual 80% could be an Uber ride to the hospital.
Oh God.
But I mean, it is job security,
Yeah.
and people don't understand what we do. Some people look at us as just an Uber ride. They don't understand we basically have an emergency room on wheels in a
Yeah.
that we can treat you with if needed.
Yeah.
Um, but I can't say so the EMTs, the basic level, they get a different type of call volume than we get. Sometimes they overlap each other.
Yeah.
So we'll get unconscious calls,
Okay. Yep.
and about 60% of the times it's just some intoxicated guy sleeping on the corner that a concerned citizen is worried about, and they'll call in either the
Yeah.
unconscious or the cardiac arrest. You get the cardiac arrest, unconscious in front of the liquor store, 12 o'clock Saturday night. Most of the time, you know what it is. But that's not to be taken for granted, because I've had
Yeah.
cardiac arrests that were in
Of
front of
course.
the liquor store or
Yeah.
in front of the bar midnight.
Yeah. And is
Yeah.
it I don't know if it would be the same for you, that like the person is so concerned but yet they don't wait around. They just make the phone call and like do the dash.
The first thing I told my, fellow citizens, did you try waking him up? And they just look
Like
at me, and I tap the guy in the shoulder, and he wakes up. Like, bro, you want to go to the hospital? He's no, all right. Have a good day.
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I think people get scared and all that kind of thing, and then there's
They
that
mean
weird.
well. They mean well. That's the important.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was just, we see a lot of those calls, and I was a cop to be like, oh, I'm really concerned and da 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 da, and it's like, okay, so what did you do about it, or are you still on scene? Can you give us an update? They're like, oh no, I left. I just
Yeah.
thought you should know. It's like,
Third,
awesome,
because
thanks, buddy.
we get a computer screen that gives us the digital
Yeah,
information, the type of what the third party caller not on scene anymore. Like they just called and walked away. So that
yeah,
happens.
yeah, yeah. I feel like
But
that is
you know
very
what
cool.
though, we always have to respond in priority mode, because you just never know until you get there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Nah, and that makes sense. And sometimes, weirdly enough, like I think sometimes if it is bullshit, you kind of go, all right, like might be a little waste my time, but hey, like that person's okay. Instead of like you're saying, like,
Yeah.
yeah, a drunk you have to wake up, as opposed to a cardiac arrest. Like
But
it's
that's exactly how I look at it. And I tell my partners too, because they're like, oh man, why we get called for this? Like, look, better to have this than an actual emergency where we got to work and, clean up, and, somebody's suffering because of it.
exactly, exactly. It's like the old evidence ethos that we got taught. It's like you'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Nah, yeah, exactly.
All right. So I wanted to ask you, so the reason that Fidel and I actually kind of made contact with each other was on the wonderful world of Instagram. And can you tell me a little bit about what First Responder Stories is?
So that's a little Instagram page that I started about 2 years ago.
Mhm.
So s- I used to watch this YouTube channel. I don't know the name of his channel. His name is Mr. Ball, and he tells stories
Okay.
of, I don't know if you ever heard of him. He tells stories of like true crime, but he did such a great job of retelling these stories. I watched him all the time, so I was a
Yeah.
big fan of his. I watched him. So one day, it was tour change, and me and the guys, girls, well, everybody's the guys, we're sitting around
Yep.
telling war stories, and I
War
had such a
stories. Yeah.
great idea. I'm like,
Yeah.
this would make a great channel of
Yeah.
just people telling their stories, because people, like I said before, they don't really know what we do, so, and they understand. So you tell your little
Yeah.
story of something that an interesting job that you've had.
Yeah.
My motto is, you can make them laugh or you can make them cry. Just tell the story, whatever you want to tell the story about. And it's
Yeah.
not like, I am no way Mr. Ball, and he does a great job of telling the story. So I can't tell the story. So what I do is I have my colleagues just tell the story, whatever they want to tell. So I actually have
Yeah.
some funny stories and some, tragic stories on it also.
Yeah.
That's it. I haven't done
Yeah.
anything with it recently. I put it on the back burner for now, but
Yeah. Oh, you're a busy man. I understand. Um, but yeah, no, and I actually sort of before we jumped on here to have a chat tonight, I went back and looked because I really vividly remembered, and I don't know how we sort of ended up finding each other, whether I followed you or you followed me, or I can't really remember, but I still remember the most vivid video that you posted, and I think it was either of like a colleague or someone you knew in New York, and he was telling, or like, recalling an incident where there was a baby that was stabbed. Do you remember that one?
uh, the the stab. I remember. I think I know what you're talking about. It was a pediatric cardiac
Trauma.
arrest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, actually, I have like two or three stories with pediatric
Oh,
arrests on
okay.
this.
It
And
was a guy. It's a guy sitting
the
in the
police
back of.
officer was running out with the baby in his hand, to the crew, and gave him the baby. It was stabbed by the father. I think
Yeah.
if I'm yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. And that one was like just the kind of the way that he um I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but the way that he sort of told that story, and it was so authentic because he kind of also went through like what he was thinking at the time, like, this woman like running out with this baby with like a butter knife, a butter knife straight through its head, like, and he actually, in the video, he's just like, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, he just, and I really loved it because he was so like, open and honest and like authentic, and like, going through the motion of how they treated the scene and what they did and what was really important, and obviously his key focus was on getting I think it was like a toddler, I think it was like a 2-year-old, like, to the hospital to receive treatment and all that kind of thing. But then he was also able to acknowledge, like, afterwards, he was just like, damn, that was like really full on.
yeah, we get those memorable calls. Although we get a high call volume, and we see a lot of different stuff. There's those one or two stories that stick in
Yeah.
your brain,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
He's actually, I think I know, he's actually, I work with him now, actually,
Oh,
still.
really?
Yeah. We tend to, in EMS is a small community, in 911,
Okay.
I should say. We all know each other, so we all work with each
Yep.
other in different agencies. So
Yeah.
he's still doing it. He's still doing his thing out
Yeah.
there.
No, he just seemed like a really awesome dude, and yeah, just like the way that he told it, and he's a big guy, like big. He looked sort of tall, like a, quite like an intimidating looking guy. And he was able to convey that, like, he did his job, but in the aftermath, like, he sort of said that, like, the job bothered him, for a little bit, and he was able to, get past it, and he's okay. But I think there's a lot of power in sort of someone like that who's clearly so proficient in what they do, but being able to go like, man, that shit fucking rattled me. Like, like, I think there's something really important in being able to admit that.
Yeah, he's kind of like me. His nickname is we call him the Trauma King because he likes to buff,
Oh, Jesus.
he likes to buff trauma jobs. So in the way it works in New York, we share the same frequency. So if we hear a gunshot or a stabbing come over and they assign it to another unit, the other unit might want to do it just because for the adrenaline, to
Yeah.
and to render patient care, and they'll buff the job. Like, no, this unit say, no, we're 5 minutes away. Give us the job. So he's always good at buffing those trauma
He's
jobs.
a glutton for punishment by the
Yeah.
sounds of it.
But he does it, because he generally likes to help people. He also volunteers. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't want to shout him out because I didn't
No.
no, but I'll let him know that his story was memorable.
It did. It really, really resonated. And with your permission, Fidel, like when I drop our podcast episode, and I'll share some details on Instagram, would you mind if I reshared that video from your account, just so like the listeners can know which one it is?
Oh, absolutely. Be my guest, and if you want, I could also get you his contact info if you ever wanted to do a podcast with him. If
I
he's
would
willing
love
to,
that. Yeah, absolutely. If he'd be interested, I would love to have a chat with him. He seemed
so
like a ripper bloke.
once this is over, we'll
Yeah.
conference and see if it's the actual. I want to make sure it's the same person, and
Yeah.
then I'll contact him and I'll let you guys exchange info, or I'll give
I
you his info.
appreciate that. That'd be cool. Thank you.
I'm
Um,
I'm sure he would love to do a podcast with you.
That'd be cool. Thank you. And so, yeah, so for anyone listening, if you are on Instagram or Facebook, please jump on and follow First Responder Stories. So from my understanding, the handle is first_responder_stories. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So jump on and follow Fidel, and he shares like all kinds of stuff on there. So you share sort of lots of different sort of, obviously, quote unquote, first responder stories, but it's from, all of the different domains. And I think I remember back in September, you shared some really like poignant stories about people who sort of either responded on 9/11 to the terrorist attacks, or, people who'd lost their lives in the aftermath, and all that kind of thing. And there were some really, really just like important stories that you shared that I think was, very worthwhile as well.
Thank you. That was more of the written word.
Yeah. But that's okay. We're allowed to read on Instagram and Facebook. Doesn't have to be the quick 10-second thing. But you said that's kind of just been on like the back burner a little bit, like
these stories, just the videos, because I did the organ transplant for a little while. That took a lot of my time, and I'm also I the business I tried to start is not panning out for logistic reasons, and so I'm actually back in school now, trying to finish up my graduate degree. So I need to focus on that until that's done, and I'll start getting more stories. You know what it is? It's hard to get people to tell me their stories sometimes, because we have a lot of people are afraid of HIPAA, which is patient privacy. So they think if you tell the story, they're violating HIPAA. But I tell them, listen, you don't have to mention any names or anything like that. But I don't like to pressure people. So
no,
I'd
of
say,
course.
do you have a
And
story?
look, but no, I like, I just 100% understand it. Like, it's even just, getting on and doing this, and even some of my previous guests on here have had, some apprehension about coming on and telling their story and all that kind of thing. And so I definitely get it. But I think equally, you know, like some of the videos that you share and what I sort of try to do here with this podcast, I think, you know, spreading that level of camaraderie that we all experience a lot of the same things and we all go through a lot of the same things. And I think there's a lot of sort of power in hearing it from people who are boots on the ground. It's not, you know, someone who, you know, has like 50 million degrees and sort of can tell you it from a theoretical perspective. It's like people going like, no, I went and I did this job and this is what I experienced, or this is what I did. And I think there's something to be said for that. Or that's, you know, why I do what I do.
I appreciate
it. All right. So if you don't mind, Fidel, I would like just to pivot briefly to the mental health aspect of being a first responder. And so when it comes to mental health, and when you were sort of joining up to become, you know, an EMS member, is anything ever mentioned or broached or recommended before you went to the job?
As far as how to handle a job,
Yeah,
critical.
or just how to handle all of like the trauma that you're going to see. Like obviously there's a level of awareness when you sign up for this kind of job, but yeah.
Especially after COVID, you know, a lot of city agencies and hospital agencies started looking at the mental health aspect of first responders. A few colleagues did commit suicide because of COVID. And they were, you know, fire department. It made the news. I don't know if you heard about it down there. So a lot of the powers that be started looking more at the mental health
Yeah.
aspect of first response. So there was always critical incident debriefing. There's a team.
Yep,
Uh,
CISM team, yep.
so so REMSCO, which is the state governing body for EMS, whenever something critical happens, they'll reach out to the personnel that were involved if they need
Okay.
counseling. It's not forced. It's very at your discretion if you want to talk to somebody, and it's
Okay.
personal if you want to. We just
Yep.
had actually, me personally, I had a colleague that was stabbed on the job,
Wow.
and so I was there at the scene, and
Mhm.
you know, she's she's doing better, but I had the state board reach
Yep.
out to me to see if I needed uh you know, some type of counseling, and I told them I'll be okay for now. I mean, so like I told you before, I've always been able to handle um these critical incidences well,
Mhm.
at least so far. You know, we never know what lays in the back of the mind that's
Yeah.
dormant that can surface 10, 20 years from now. I remember my first job as an EMT, my first cardiac arrest. I was with a seasoned EMT,
Mhm.
and you know, he had to touch the body, do CPR, and he was like, "Hey, how'd you feel touching a dead body for the first time?" And I was like, you know, so I just look while I'm working with my
Yep.
patient. Uh, I tried, you know, of course, I tried to do my best, and
Of course.
um, I don't like to say save a life because we nobody saves anything. It sounds a little morbid, but we prolong the inevitable. Everybody dies, right? So
That's an
well,
interesting way to look at it.
we try to extend that time, you know, for
Yeah.
that patient and their
Yeah.
family. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, and it's just a task at hand at the time is what I'm doing. So
Yep.
the reason I developed that technique when I was in my first year of college. I took an acting class as an elective, and I was
Yeah.
scared to death. And I mean, I suck as an actor. That's why I'm not an actor. But the professor told me, don't worry about don't worry about anything else that's going on. Just worry about your lines and what you have to do. And so I carry that over into my profession. I've always worked well under pressure. That's like
Yeah.
I'm at my best under pressure. And so
Yep.
I focus on the patient at hand, and I do my job. I clean
Mhm.
up after, and that job stays there. It doesn't come home
Okay.
with me. And it's not a conscious effort. It's just the
Mhm.
way I've been. I don't know why. And I've always been like, okay, these are adults. It maybe it's going to get me one day when I have my first pediatric cardiac
Yeah.
arrest. And I remember my first pediatric. It was a 5-year-old that choked on an
Mm.
apple, and we did our best. We were able to get him back. He ended up passing away in the hospital like a few days later. But
Yeah.
I take reassurance that I'm always reading, I'm always learning, I'm always practicing my skills, because
Hmm.
if you don't use it, you lose it. In pediatric jobs, we don't always get
Yeah.
especially critical patients. So, but I'm fortunate enough that like my manager called me, hey Fidel, that same day actually, I heard you and your partner had a pediatric arrest. Do you need the rest of the day off? Do you need to talk to anybody? I was very appreciative of him calling me, but I was like, no, I'm fine. I'll keep
Yep.
going. But I've had colleagues that have had to go home, literally start crying on scene because um, and specifically pediatric
Yeah.
jobs where stuff is pretty traumatic to see, and they've
Yep.
gone home and they've been offered counseling by the hospital and by the city. So there's numerous resources you can reach out to here if you have
Hmm.
um, some sort of I don't want to say PTSD, but like some sort of a
Like
stress
an
that
emotional response to,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly, that's a better term, emotional response to the job.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, look, and like you're saying, I think in any of these first responder professions, there is just something different about when it comes to a child, a baby, that kind of like pediatric, trauma in a sense. Like anything happening to anyone can be upsetting, and you feel for the family and their partners and children, all that kind of thing. But when it is, I think, someone who we would all consider to be defenseless and, never at fault or at blame or anything like that. And when something awful happens to them, and then you're the ones who are arriving and trying your best to help them, like I think it's natural to, you know, feel something extra
Yeah,
sometimes.
absolutely right. I'm cold inside. No, I'm just kidding. No, I do.
You're cold and dead like my husband. That's okay.
No,
I'm used
I
to
do try my best for my patients, but
it.
if you
um,
so the reason I guess one of the reasons I'm still happy doing the work I do is because I don't take it home with me, and
yeah,
I still enjoy the work and giving people extended time on Earth.
yeah. And I think, and I actually, Fidel and I were texting sort of earlier, like organizing this interview, and I actually wrote that quote down, believe it or not, from like our text messages, because you were like, it's the reason I'm still able to do the job for so long and enjoy it. And I think, I think whether you're conscious of it or not, and like you're saying, the what's the word, like the trick that acting teacher gave you, like it's a, compartmentalization in some form or respect. And if it does allow you to be able to do your job effectively and proficiently and professionally, then that's awesome, you know
Thank you.
um I guess, like you're saying, it seems like there is a lot, though, if you did find yourself struggling at any point, and that there are a lot of resources that you can reach out to, should that be an issue. Um, and you seem to say like a lot of that has come post COVID. Like, was there anything substantial sort of pre-COVID, or it's really more just come about in the last few years?
There was before, but to say it was substantial would be stretching it,
Okay.
but a lot of
Yeah.
this stemmed off of COVID. The mental health resources that are available to us came
Hmm.
post COVID.
Okay.
We had uh, critical incident debriefing. Um, I don't want to say teams, but I forgot what would you call the collective of people that would be assigned to that job of talking to you, but they're not counselors. That was my whole thing. They're just like your manager and your director that received a little bit of training on
Yeah,
what's
well, I think different ones are different. So sometimes it's like a peer group one, and then sometimes there's, I guess, like a leader or a manager of like a CISM, critical incident stress management. Yeah, it's like a team or a debriefing, or I know, yeah, there's like another term which I just did the class like
critical
6 months
incident
ago, so I
stress.
really should know what it is.
The name is real long, but
Yeah,
now, but I was mentioning that because now there are actual mental health providers that are available to us to talk to that
yeah,
specialize in
yeah,
this, in this type of care,
yeah,
and we could seek them out free of cost. I should say that to us because you
yeah.
know cost of counseling is one thing, and insurance sometimes don't cover it. So if you're involved in an incident, or even sometimes even if you're not, if you just need someone to talk to, there are
Mhm.
resources available,
Yeah,
which is a
and that,
good thing. Yeah,
yeah, it's brilliant, and we can, in one sense, we can say better late than never, but and it took, like a global pandemic to make it, so it's really sounds like it's excellent, but for the people who go and help everyone else, they are the ones that should have the best help available if and when they need it, or if and when they choose to access it. So it sounds like it's pretty good in your department.
it is. But we're stubborn though. We won't go.
Can I ask how your partner is that got stabbed? Is she doing it?
Um, she has a lot of rehab to go through. I don't think she'll be working EMS anymore, but
Okay.
she's doing a lot better.
Yep.
She had
Okay.
a lot of physical rehab to go through. From when I talked to her, her mental status, she wants to come back to work, but she physically can't.
Yep.
So
That's
that's the sad part. She actually wants to work still,
Yeah.
and I mean, the sad part is her getting stabbed in the first place. But she
I
wants to
I know
come,
what you mean though. Yeah. Yeah.
she physically can't at this time.
Yeah.
But I don't think she will.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot, it's one of the up there with one of the worst things that could possibly happen to you on duty, and especially as a paramedic. Like I think when you're like a police officer and stuff like that, like you kind of, there's that level of anticipation, and we get sort of taught in the academy of trying to disarm people, and we carry weapons. And for you guys who purely arrive at a scene to administer care and administer like medical resources, like it's,
Yeah, the last thing you expect or want is to be attacked by someone you're there to help.
yeah,
But
that's,
that's the unfortunate real reality of the job that we do,
yeah,
and that is why we get, for the most part, police officers that are assigned to our jobs. They're there for our protection,
yeah,
but they're not. There's a limited amount of officers, so they're not always
yeah,
there when we need them.
yeah. No, right, and that's, yeah, that's wow. I'm really, really sorry about your colleague, and I hope she
Thank
I hope
you.
she recovers really, really well. Um,
It's tough.
I Yeah, definitely. And I think, I even think back to my sort of general duty policing days, and we would get called to jobs where someone was like injured, but there was not necessarily known like the circumstances, or the circumstances were like, shit's gone down. Um, we'd get to the job, and we call them the ambos back home. Like the ambos are like parked around the corner. Then they're just
Mm,
like, that's our protocol. We're not going in unless the
yeah,
coppers are there. And it was just the way that it was. So,
it's
sometimes you have to protect yourself above all else.
Yeah, it's kind of similar here, where if we read the text, even if it's not a violent job, if we read the text and we don't feel safe, we're perfectly in our right to wait for police officers to get there or to drive
Yep.
away. But
Yep.
sometimes you get like for instance the call with my colleague, it was a medical call for like
Mm.
I don't know if it was a chest pain or difficulty breathing, that
Yep.
the call just went south, and you wouldn't even think it would happen.
And
It's just a random act of violence.
he was like the patient that you guys got called there to assist.
He, he was their patient. Yes.
Jesus
in the back of
Christ.
it. Yeah. So.
Ugh,
But,
that's
but, I mean, it's that's not a common occurrence, right? I don't
yeah.
want people to think that it's
No.
happening all day,
You're
every
like
day,
you're like,
but it's
"Stop
actually.
shitting on New York."
We've had another colleague in. I forgot. I didn't know the person. He was shot by a patient in the back, yep, in his back as he was leaving the ambulance. This was
Oh
like
my
two,
god.
3 years ago. We had the fire department EMT that was killed by not her patient, but it was a regular patient that she got run over by the ambulance. So we've had our fair share of occurrences
God.
with violence, I should say.
That's pretty tragic.
Mm.
And you sort of mentioned earlier too that and you might not know, so if you don't, that's totally fine. But like you said that being sort of like a number of suicides either during or after COVID,
Yeah.
is that sort of something that you're still hearing, like amongst all the different services, that is still something that's occurring, or does it seem like it has kind of eased off since the like the height of COVID where everything was so intense?
Yeah, it was mostly during the suicides with EMS personnel was actually 2020, 2021. I haven't heard much about it
Yeah.
recently. And I mean, I don't really know, but as far as the media says, it was directly related to the stress of responding during the
Yeah.
pandemic.
Yep. Yep. Okay. No, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Um, so before we move on, tell me, you clearly work really hard, and I know you're studying to go back and did you say you were getting your master's?
Yeah, it's not related to EMS. It's my union pays for school, so why
Oh, cool.
not
No,
use free
that's
education when I can?
good.
I'm a lifelong learner.
Yeah. No,
So
no, no. That's awesome. I love that. So tell me what you do outside of work for fun. What makes Fidel tick?
I'm laughing because it's like a dating app question. I'm just kidding. What do you do for?
Don't
Uh,
swipe me yet, Fidel. We haven't
no, no, no.
finished.
So I have my children. They live with my ex. They're a little bigger now. So when they were smaller, my priority outside of work was try to spend time with them. But now that
Mhm.
they're a little bigger, I go to the gym. I try to exercise when I can. I study. I go to school.
Yep.
I bike ride,
Mhm.
and the occasional cocktail whenever my colleagues are having a get together. But that's
Very
about it. I
nice.
try to travel. I try to travel whenever I can.
Mhm.
I I have a group of friends that we do boys trips with. Last year we went to the Dominican Republic.
Oh,
This year
lovely.
I think next year we're planning on hopefully going to Guatemala because one of my friends he's from Guatemala. So when we travel, we don't go to resorts. We actually go into the the campos, we call it, the villages, and see the, because when we went last year to Dominican, a close friend, because New York is it's a melting pot. It's an eclectic mix of cultures. So
Yeah,
I have friends
very
from
much so,
a
yeah.
lot of different ethnicities. So we
Mhm.
went to DR. I fell in love with the country itself. It's such a beautiful country. ATV riding through the hills.
Oh,
I went
wow, that'd be so much fun.
I was drinking Presidentes on an ATV, which doesn't mix. I almost flew off the cliff. There's no safety measures out there.
Can I ask what is that, a type of beer, or is that
Beer,
something
yeah, it's a beer. And so when you're driving through the woods, there's like a random saloon in the woods somewhere that
else?
they use, I guess, for people on the trail. And for $5, you get a beer that's about this big.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
not a good idea. But
No, probably
it was
not.
fun. It was fun. It was fun. I was on.
Well, at least you'd be able to provide some kind of level of care should the worst
You
happen.
know, it's funny you say that, right? Because I have friends like, "Oh, you're a paramedic. If anything happens, I'm gonna call you." I'm like, "No. First of all, you call 911, and then you can call me." But it's like I don't bring the ambulance home with me. Man is only as good as his tools. I don't have any tools with me. There's nothing I can do. Only thing I can tell you to do is call 911. I'm
Yeah.
joking. But you're
Yeah.
right. I could recognize the emergency when I see one.
Exactly. Know how to like do a tourniquet and put pressure on. Sometimes, just little bits and pieces help.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to say thank you for giving me your time
My
tonight.
pleasure. You're
I do
welcome.
appreciate it. Now, I do normally end these podcast episodes by asking the guests two final questions.
Sure.
So I do know that number one may be a little bit challenging for you, but we'll just see how we go with it. So the podcast is called I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. And that is in regards to sort of the darkness, elements that can permeate first responder roles and what we see and what we do and what we experience and all that kind of thing. So the first question I normally ask is, what do you do to hold space for your own darkness in terms of the things that you see?
So, as I mentioned to you before, I don't really no. So maybe that. So what I'm worried about, maybe that is my darkness, that I don't have any darkness right now, but it's all accumulating in the back of my brain.
Yeah.
And, I have some sort of protective mechanism that I don't realize, that there's a reason why I don't take the work home with me. And maybe one day it'll manifest itself. Hopefully it doesn't. But
Yeah.
I think the way I handle it, I'm not too sure. Well, I grew up in New York City. I grew up playing in the street as a teenager. I was, out and about, all hours of the night, seeing a lot of things. So I got kind of conditioned
Yep.
to what I would see in EMS before I started working EMS, from just
Yeah.
being a New Yorker alone.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm able to take that lesson from my professor and just focus on the task at hand and
Mm-hmm.
not think about anything else, like if it's so when I go on an assignment, of course, scene safety, you have to be aware, of your safety. But my partner be like, "Hey, did you see that painting on the wall?" I'm like, "No, I didn't see
Yeah.
anything. I saw my patient and
Yeah.
whatever mattered for my patient care at that time, and that was it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't focus on anything else. Clean up, do my paperwork, and move on to the next job." And the only
Yeah.
time I remember a job that we did, it's if it was an interesting call, like you mentioned the story with one of my colleagues, interesting
Mm-hmm.
or something out of the ordinary. And most of the time, I recall it because of, because no two jobs are the same. I'm always trying to learn. You treat one patient one way, you might treat a different patient, another patient a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always trying to powwow with my partners to see what we could have done better on a certain job, or we did a good job. What did we do right?
Yeah.
Or what did we do wrong?
Yeah.
So that's the only time I really think of the job, but I never think about it as, oh my God, so sad. I mean, it is sad. I recognize it,
Yeah.
but I don't internalize it for
Yeah.
whatever reason. And I've always been like that since day one of my career.
Yeah. But no, like I and I know that, we did speak offline and you're like, I don't know what the fuck to say about like holding my darkness. But I think, like I sort of said to you, like I think that shows, an amazing amount of resilience that's obviously come about, like you're saying, from even like from your adolescence and seeing things and bearing witness to things that left an imprint, and you've just learned how to cope. And so your way of coping is of compartmentalizing. Just you focus on the job at hand at the time, and then you like you leave it where it was, and you compartmentalize, and you just actively, or maybe not actively, or subconsciously, you just don't bring it home with you. And that's something
It's
to be said
definitely,
for that.
yeah, it's
It's what,
definitely
sorry?
subconscious.
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. No, but I think it's awesome. And you know, every single person I've asked that question gives a different answer, and it's your answer. So that's brilliant. I appreciate you sharing it. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Um,
Maybe I'm actually, I might be in trouble because, those individuals that do have a dark place, they're learning slowly how to deal with it. I like once it happens to me, I don't know if I know how to deal with it once it does. If it does, hopefully it doesn't. But
yeah. That's all
I,
right. You can come back and talk to me then. That's okay.
as of right now,
let's
I'm still doing
let's hope we don't have to.
it, right.
All right, and one final question, Fidel, if you don't mind. And so the second aspect that I ask is, what is one thing that you or what's one thing that someone could do for you should you find yourself in a place of like maybe struggling to cope with something? What's one thing that you could think of that someone could do for you to help you in that aspect of holding space for your darkness should you fall under the spell of it?
Just, I guess, like any time we have, I've had times where I've needed, to talk to someone, not because of EMS, for, other stresses in life, but just sometimes people just need to vent and talk and release whatever they have inside. So just someone to non-judgmentally and quietly listen to what you have to say and just let it out. I guess that would probably what I would need if I ever come across any type of uh, emotional stress that I need to let out.
Yep. And like you're saying, it doesn't have to always be work related. It can be personal related. Like, life is tough at times, and so like if that's what you need to support you, is just someone to be there to listen and to be able to vent, and especially like no judgment. That's what a true friend really is.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not immune to the stress. I've had relationship stress that I've had, like a good friend that I would always call and talk to
Yeah.
and just let me talk, and that always helped.
Yeah.
And whenever I wanted advice, only then they would give advice when requested. So that's
and that's a special person, because most of the time people are trying to shove their advice down your throat. So to know the difference.
It's human nature, I guess, to always offer your 2 cents into something. But I try not to, when someone's talking to me. I try my best. Sometimes you can't hold it in, especially if you think they're doing something stupid. But
you're like, do you want to hear my 2 cents on this matter? You're like, please say yes. All right, Fidel. Well, I have taken up far too much of your time this evening, but I really just want to say thank you for coming on and speaking. I think there's been a lot of benefit in you sharing, some of your experiences and even just the way that you are able to separate and leave everything that you see at work. Like, I think that is, an incredible level of resilience, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come and share it with us tonight.
oh, thank you for having me, and thank you for what you do. Also, giving people a platform to express themselves and how they cope with their stressors in life, and for what you do as a profession, also with the counseling. Thank you. I'm sure there's a lot of first responders that have benefited from just talking to you.
Thank you, Fidel. That's really kind of you to say. I appreciate it. All right. So, like I said, if you are on Instagram or Facebook, jump on and follow Fidel at First Responder Stories. And he shares some really wonderful content that's definitely worth a watch and worth a listen and a read in times too. So, all right, let's wrap it up. This has been I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I'm your host, Erin Jane. And as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Thanks.
Okay.